Hello, hello. Hi, everyone. Can you see me? So we are live. We are streaming here the panel from QA or the highway, and I'm going to take my place and give here behind us our friend Joe the word to get all the proper introductions.
Hello, everyone. My name is Joe Beal, and I'm president of the QA or the Highway Conference. And this panel here is a QA All-Star panel discussion. For those of you who are expecting Joel Montbeliski, I apologize. Joel was not able to make it. He had a family situation come up, and so he's still back at home. And we didn't have enough time to change the print material. So I know it says on the schedule that he's going to still talk, but Joel's not going to be here. So what I've done is I put together, I asked some of our most respected panelists to come and form this, our most respected speakers to come and form this all-star panel. And I'm going to pitch them some questions and ask them to give their thoughts. And hopefully we'll get some questions from the audience and maybe even from around the world via the live stream that Leandra has going right now. So before we go any further, I'll just say, my name is Joe. I've been in testing since 2002. I work for Tricentis, test for automation company, and I'll hand it over to Jeff to introduce himself.
All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Jeff. I'm Director of Engineering at a company called Irritable. Irritable itself is a SaaS company, B2B. We're a marketing platform. I've been in QA for about 17 years. Right now, currently, I manage two organizations, the quality organization and the engineering operations team. So my focus mostly is on running engineering, making sure it's effective, efficient, making sure our kind of quality is good, our customers are happy.
Hi, everyone. I am Leandro Melendez, also known as Señor Performo. I am a dev advocate at Grafana K6. Go all over the world, giving talks, conferences, these streams, trying to spread the word of performance testing and best practices, QA, IT, and many other things. I'm so happy to be here and to be given this chance to share with everyone a discussion.
Hi, my name is Damian Synadinos. I started testing software in 1993. I did that for about 25 years. In 2014, I began speaking at conferences, testing and tech conferences. In 2016, I started my company, Ineffable Solutions, to become a professional full-time public speaker. I also do improv. I did that for 15 years. I'm an artist. You can check that at idrawstrangers.com. I'm an author. I wrote a children's book, Hank and Stella and Something from Nothing. I'm a substitute teacher. I teach elementary schools around the Columbus area, and that's all.
Whoa.
That's mentioned husband and father.
Oh my gosh, yeah, tough to follow that. So my name is Carlos Kidman. I'm the head of engineering at a company called Quality AI, and I'll be presenting a little bit later on as well if you want to come to mind, but nothing near as cool as that.
All right, thank you, panelists. So the first question I have for you today, and you know what, I don't have to stand here, although I'm in the camera if I stand here, but the first question I have for you today is the thing that's on everybody's mind. You know, you've heard about this chat GPT thing and this artificial intelligence and machine learning. What in the world is going on with that, and how should I be approaching this as a software tester? Who wants to go first?
Yeah, so I actually attended a really awesome session, the last one. It's too bad that Rod's not here, but I thought it was excellent. He actually showed different use cases for how you can use ChatGPT, and I went to that session because I wanted to see how testers were trying to leverage that. And so he did a great job of using it as a personal assistant, getting inspiration, asking questions, having it do a lot of the tedious work. For example, like posting a user story and asking what are some good test cases for this. It generated those test cases. He got some. He put them into his test case repository. Some other ones, he said, I need more details for this one. Give me more details on number 3 and 4. It gave him more details. He added those to the repository and then asked, can you give me these ones in Gherkin format now? And it did that. Like, it was just really cool to see the process of a tester using that. So I thought that was very enlightening. So I imagine that with ChatGPT, I think if you get creative with it and you use it as a good tool, I think it can be really helpful.
I sometimes refer to artificial intelligence as artificial humanity. I'm not quite sure always how intelligent it is, but it's very human-like in that it can confidently spout a mixture of facts and fiction, just like many humans can. And just the same way that you have to be wary and skeptical and sometimes trust but verify when you're asking a human being a question, I think the same should be said with anything that you're requesting information from ChatGPT. It's a very powerful tool, and tools can be used for good or evil. Tools can be used wisely or unwisely. And that's kind of my broad idea of what ChatGPT is, the newest incredible tool that's still being discovered use cases for, and should be treated just like a human in that sense.
For me, all the AI, not only ChatGPT, all the other tools, and I wouldn't be surprised that many other pop up, very similar to any other tools that in history we have received and have appeared. Automobiles that would displace horses, and well, chauffeurs will be out of work because we don't have horses anymore. Well, you become a driver. So my feeling is that we won't be replaced. Don't be afraid. Skynet is not here yet or anything like that. But it's a tool. It's something that we will be able to use. I have already seen several places where they use AI to be helped on creating automations, creating the code that will happen. Probably better find that elusive semicolon in our code that often we spend so many hours. The IT can right away get it, and the AI, sorry, and use it as a tool. It's going to come with many more things that we can do with it, that we can get leverage and be helped. Don't be afraid, embrace it, and start checking this. I think AI prompt engineer role that is coming up, where as good as you get asking these questions and leveraging the tools, better job opportunities, productivity, and benefit you will get on all that.
So I think from what I've seen, so for SaaS companies, a lot of the questions they ask is who has your data, what's going on, right? Like you have to pass certain audits. And the reason why we haven't seen great adoption of like Copilot is that in order to learn, it has to see your code, it has to see your data. And a lot of companies that use your SaaS companies aren't comfortable with potentially giving that. So I see it kind of as a cliff, right? We're still waiting for the shoe to drop to see how these AI companies can safely handle your data, not like potentially learn and give it to someone else. And until they can kind of do that, I don't see wide adoption of Copilot for certain industries yet. On the other hand, I feel like we're just waiting for, the best use case to come out. And when that becomes like, de facto, this is how it does it, it's safe, everyone does it, I see the adoption of how to use that tool. Now, with that being said, I do see, as a people manager, I see AI as a huge tool, right? Because we want our, QA engineers, developers to be able to document well, to be able to write well, to be able to communicate well. And this is the soft portion of engineering. And I see this tool as a great way to, hey, help me phrase something better. How do I document better? How do I write this to my coworker? If English isn't my first language, to use this tool to kind of communicate better. So I see that as a really powerful tool to help us as engineers to be able to communicate well and document well. I just a little bit skeptical because I've seen like legal just like, no.
So that's definitely one of the worries is the ethics around things like Midjourney and Copilot, where it's being trained on a bunch of public information. But there are, in the open source space, we are trying, I say we, but other people much smarter than I are working towards making that much more accessible. So for example, you have Copilot, which is obviously from Microsoft, but there's, I believe it's from Hugging Face, called StarCoder. Y'all can jot that down. There's StarCoder, which is a free version of Copilot, and it has like a Visual Studio Code extension, and all the data that it was trained on was data that was approved by the people that gave them that data. So we're already working towards that. And we can also do other types of stuff with data. Come to my session if you want to learn more. But other things with data that we can do with like anonymization and masking and some pretty cool things we can do as well. So we are working towards making it much more safe data, much more usable and accessible stuff.
So audience, anybody have any questions around this topic? I have a follow-up, but I don't want to cut in for the audience, so. Because, okay, so Carlos, I have heard of tools that claim, so for example, automation tools that claim that their tool can heal itself based on AI information. What do you know about that, and can you explain how that works?
Sure, my tool does that. So yes, so for the most part, each company will do it a little bit differently. And again, come to my talk if you want to know more, because I'll actually dive into it. But each company will do it a little bit differently. So when they say self-healing, the concept is you are trying to instead of using like a static selector, like you would normally do in like a Playwright or Cypress or whatnot, you have the selectors almost be dynamic, and you at runtime let it determine what that selector should be. And then as it figures out what the new one is, then it'll save that. And then the next time it goes again, it'll say, is that still valid? If not, look again and see if I can find the new one. And that's essentially what it's trying to do. And each company will do it slightly differently. Some are better than others. But yeah, it's self-healing in that way, but I wouldn't say it's like a perfect science. There's still limitations to it. The web is the Wild West, my friends.
Yeah, I could add to a few of those where having enough data and knowing what happens with your system and how to turn around with that data and apply it on your system for self-healing, it's going to be, well, many organizations already have it out there and are working with it, but it all depends on how you set up this data, how you set up these processes, and what you can configure. Eventually supposed to be able to learn from those configurations that you do and implement automatically a few new ones. But again, I feel it's sold like the mythical, utopic, everything is going to be solved and world peace and everything. But still, we have to work around it and set all these parameters, SLOs, SLAs, configurations, and tell it where is a problem and what to do to fix to these systems. So yes, it's out there. It works somewhat here and there, but it's not the panacea that we have been told, sold, or informed. There are very good ones out there, but you still have to work around them. So again, you won't be out of a job or position.
So let me speak to a little bit. It's interesting that Carlos described the way that it does the selectors, right? And it chooses the different selector. So the tool that I work with is Tricentis Tosca. And the way that it does self-healing is you identify it's a model-based solution, and the model itself has the locators on it. So you identify which models are the ones that are self-healing, and it takes that locator that has been chosen and attempts to reconcile that with what it sees if there's a problem. So for example, if you're locating by the text on the screen, if it doesn't match, it attempts to reconcile what the text was with what it is now and create a match there. And so it's slightly different, but I think it's the same concept as what you're talking about. It's a sort of live action reconciliation.
Many flavors.
Yeah.
Right. It was just an example.
Sure. All right. Do we have any questions from the web, Leandro? Can you tell?
We have hundreds. There you go. You need the.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of skeptical about it. I think this need to be within a frame of a pattern. If that pattern is not present, then AI cannot recognize it. So the developers, when they're developing the software, when they're using all those elements, when we are talking about self-healing, means like very often we find that element name change, element location change. So if you have a selector that selecting and like Selenium, sometimes it uses the coordination, or you have a frame within frame, or you have another element on top of it and it's behind it, even though user can see it, they can interact with it. But when by code you try to click on it, it falls into different frame or different element because of the coordination. Within that frame, I don't know how effective it is to self-healing.
So the mere mention of the word frame gives me pain as an automation professional. But assuming that the frame hasn't changed, the locator within it is what you're
Yeah,
trying to look at.
I mean,
It's really no different than it would
that's
be anywhere else.
very,
If
very
the frame
minimum.
changes, that's a different story, yeah.
It's very minimum. So a lot of time that, that total ID change, but if you are selecting the element by name, or if it's a dynamic element, or
Well, I hope
if
it's not
if they
dynamic
use
element.
if they use material UI, then it's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right, and that's why I said there's limitations, because even in something that, like in ours, changing position, changing the name, like our test would still see it. Like that's actually not a difficult problem to solve. But if the behavior of your application changes, like all of a sudden you have pop-ups now, and the AI hasn't learned that those pop-ups are good, then yeah, it's going to flag it and say, hey, this is different from what I was expecting before, and it might flag it as a bug and say, I wasn't expecting this. And so there are ways that we can go around those kind of things, and we would need more access to your stuff. So, for example, if we had access to your code as you're developing, and we see that you're adding an iframe, then it's easy to know that the iframe is going to appear now. Right? And so there's things that we can do to make it better, but the less data we have or the less context we have, the worse the AI is going to perform.
Yeah, I think it's better how we can train it. If we can know how or get better at training it, then maybe it will be very, very useful tools, powerful tools for us. But the key is how to train it. Because when I'm going to train it, I'm going to train it against my application, and it will be customized for my use. So that's the key. So the more we can get better at it, the better result we will get.
That's my session.
Okay.
It's a point, as I was mentioning earlier, if you don't have, as you mentioned, the frame or framework parameters, I think, and you very well pointed, AI in many times is gonna require to be tailor suited to what you have in your application, to what you are changing, editing. Because as you said in your automations, if something is changed and name of an object, or okay, I need to set up my AI to be browsing it to identify when there's a change, and then to go and self-heal the scripts. So there are multiple steps that in this little example, there are many more things that you can do with self-healing, but you have to create the rules, the data, what is the AI going to be looking at, and what is going to be happening. So that's the point that I was trying to make earlier. It's not like right away out of the box and there AI go be and run around and do your thing, whatever. You need people who know what has to be done, configure the frameworks, the settings, the indicators, everything that needs to be implemented, and then start working with it and growing with it, because it's not going to be like open the box and you're set and done and forget about it. You have to keep working with it and growing. So once you get to the point where you can leverage all the goodness that comes out of it, it's going to be awesome. But at the beginning, you need some work around it.
So that's actually a really good point. From what I've seen, we've investigated a lot of this because, there's always like, how do we move faster? How do we reduce the risk? And what we've seen from talking to other companies that have done a really good job of this is AI is like almost the fourth wall. It will come and will probably help you test, but it's not the main solution. If you're like, hey, we don't have to do our traditional unit testing integration, we don't need to bug bash anymore, AI is going to do everything, that you're going to fail. Right? What we really do see is, it's like another level of protection that can cover a lot of area that you may not be able to, but a lot of the things that you still need to test, like in this case, if it's a high traffic area, high risk, you probably should still test it the traditional way. And then the training is just going to be another tool that your team may have to do. Like part of the testing is right end to end, part of testing is running the test plans, test strategy, part of the testing is spending time training the model to understand why it broke here and how to fix it and what the next steps would be.
I totally agree with it. It reminds me like when I started my testing career, we started as a manual tester. Then the new tools came out like SQA Robot or something else. Then Cucumber, Ruby Cucumber, then Cypress, on and on.
The tools
So
change. The methods change.
tool
Java's the
change,
same.
and then we learn it. We say, okay, it's gonna be awesome. Yes, but still we have to do manual testing. It's maybe 80-20, 70-30, depends on your situation or the use case you have. I have used AI already and I liked it. Like right now, let's say if you want to solve some problem, you search on the Google and you kind of spend a lot of time. But if you can ask the specific questions, it's really good at giving you the code example that you can use. But
All right,
the
it's
learning,
time to move on.
Yeah.
It's time to move on. We beat this one to death. So I have another question. This one is much more of a soft skills question. So I'm a tester. I'm working in a traditional SDLC, maybe a little bit of Agile sprinkled in. I am constantly having my resources cut, my staff cut. I'm constantly having my time cut short. And I've been being told, why aren't you finding all the defects? Okay, what do I do? Damian first.
Well, I kind of like Carlos's answer. Change companies. Leave. Well, I would pretty much phrase it to the powers that be exactly like you did. Say, my resources are getting cut, and you're still asking the same things. How can I possibly deliver? And ask what's important to them. Find all the bugs. What are the important bugs that need to be found? It's impossible to find all the bugs. You can keep looking forever. There's a great metaphor from Paul Holland about an Easter egg hunt. You can't possibly know if you found all the eggs in an Easter egg hunt because they're hidden. It's the same way that it is with bugs in an application. You'll never know if you're done finding all the eggs. You can just keep hunting. So I would ask them for their priority stack, ask them for what they find valuable, and then work with them to figure out within these parameters of resources, time, schedule, all these other things. I would work for them. I would find out, how can I provide value to you with the skills and experience and knowledge that I have? Plus one.
So, first of all, I see Matias, Daniel, and Lorena Torrijos saying hello in the networks. If anyone watching wants to send more questions or anything, I'm ready. So, for what Joe mentioned in this scenario, very similar to what Damian says, I would say the Pareto principle, 80-20 rule, try to find that 20% that will give the most benefit to the team, the things that you can do that will be most impactful. A very good departure point is to ask, like, what is impactful for management, for leadership? You gotta be careful, because if those cuts are happening and you don't show that you are being effective, maybe next. So make sure that management understands why you think that's impactful. Have a conversation, because sometimes they will be like, no, I care a lot about the green button. And you're like, well, no one clicks on that. No, but it's important for me. Okay, well, I have to. Becomes part of the Pareto, probably, the 20% that you have to pay attention, because you only have 20% of resources and time now. And make sure that it truly is impactful, meaningful, and mostly to management, because also you gotta be careful there. And yeah, I do agree with that. Start looking elsewhere. I don't know.
So I'm gonna pull Carlos. This is my talk, actually. So if you come to my talk, I'll actually walk you through this. Leading QA programs, this is very common, right? And usually it's an alignment problem, right? Why does my head of engineering, my managers want this? And is this what they really, really want, right? So generally speaking, what I do is, well, what is the business impact? What are you really asking for? Are you really asking for less defects, or are you asking for us to ship on time and give that customer experience? That changes the alignment a bit, right? Because in the head of engineering's mind, he wants customer ARR to be good, he wants retention. But when customer service comes to him, head of CS comes to him and says, we have too many bugs, they're churning. Now he's thinking bugs equals less churn. Is that correct? Is that true? Not necessarily, right? So as a head of QA, or as a QA leader, or as QA engineers, your job is to drive that alignment. What is the business impact? Is it customer satisfaction or is it on bugs? It could be the same thing, but how do you do that? And if you could draft your strategy to say, hey, I'm going to put forth this strategy, it's going to ensure that the customer satisfaction is good. Here's the KPIs behind it. Doesn't necessarily mean we're going to write 1,000 tests. We can get it using these methodologies in our SDLC, aka better acceptance criteria, just-in-time testing, better logging, better feature flagging, releasing, better monitoring, MTTRs better. You can show the change failure rates improving. You can tie it to customer service satisfaction and PS score. Suddenly it's not about bugs anymore. It's about, hey, I delivered this. So you want to control that kind of messaging. What is the alignment with leadership? What does that OKR really mean, right? If you can control it, then you won't get pinned by saying, oh, your team needs to be cutting out bugs. It's more, we did our job because we did X, Y, Z.
I'm getting some FOMO over here, feeling missing out. So my session.
What have I started?
My session was about semantics, linguistics, and we talked about messaging and asking. And oftentimes you use words to do that. So to Joe's question, what if you do if you're in that type of position? One thing I would suggest is to have semantic discussions. Ask, what do you mean? It's a very simple but sometimes difficult question because of social norms and so on, and fear of your job and fear of politics. But if you can dig down and find out what they actually mean by those questions they ask, why haven't you found all the bugs? What do you mean by that? What's important to you? What's invaluable to you? And have these semantic discussions. I think that you'll dig down and find the underlying root causes of what's really bugging them.
Okay. Anybody in the audience have a question they want to pitch out there? Yes, sir.
Wow. All right. So, according to your opinion, what are some of the good metrics to measure quality? That's a follow-up to Joe's question.
But what you don't know is that I used to work in an enterprise QA group at Huntington Bank.
Thank you.
And this guy here was in charge of metrics. That was like his whole job. Well, before I give it to any of these guys, I'll just tell you what my favorite metric is, and that is efficiency. So I recently created I work for Synadinos and I work with the Tosca tool. I recently created my own little metric called test operational efficiency. So what I did was I took the test case as it was automated and added up all the different steps that could be executed in the test. And for me, each one of those is a test operation, right? And then I asked them, okay, when this was executed manually, how long did it take? They said 2 hours, right? So then I went and looked at the automation. This is one of those long end-to-end test cases, right? So I went and looked at the automation. It took 8 minutes to execute it in automation, okay? So it was 189 test operations. When it took 2 hours, you were doing 94.5 per hour, right? But with the automation doing it in 8 minutes, it was 1,417.5 test operations per hour. And so I was able to show them that we increased the test operational efficiency by 1,500%. And that made for a really good graphic. You had the one bar was here and the other bar was here, and it looked really nice. But I'll hand it over to Carlos for his opinion on this.
Oh my gosh. I thought it was going to be Damian. Let's see. All right. I got stuff though. No worries. So I will admit that for measuring a single tester, I have not cracked that yet. So if anyone has good ideas, I'm all ears. So normally, as a head of engineering, the stuff that I really care about is more so the quality of the systems and quality of my teams. And so I think mean times are really valuable to see how fast we can actually change the system. So that's why things like operability really matter, because how quickly can we update the system, without having to make a code change, because that would require another PR and a pull request and all this craziness that you have to go through pipelines and whatnot, right? So I'm sure you've already heard of things like the DORA metrics, where you can do like mean time to resolutions, cycle times, that kind of stuff. That's a good measurement of your system's quality, and that's only like 4 or 5 different metrics. When I was at Adobe, what we ended up doing was actually creating what we call the well-architected index. Ours was not public, but I believe IBM and Microsoft do have theirs public. So if you actually search for well-architected index, or I think if you search that, you'll probably find some hits, and they actually have, here's how we measure our systems. And then there's also some from GitHub where they have how they measure their teams. So if you just search for those things, how does GitHub do it? How do they measure quality for their teams? IBM or Microsoft, how do they measure quality of their systems? You'll actually see these frameworks that they've created. Anyway, so for Adobe, we had the well-architected index. We called it that because it was the way. So you wanted to be doing it the right way, right? And what we would do is, as a organization, we had to sit down and discuss what are the things that we care about for our systems and our teams. So for example, we had a developer who was very huge into accessibility. So one of the capabilities that we measured was how accessible was your system. And we had to come up with actual grades for A versus B versus C versus D versus F, right? And what are the checks that you can do to say, and like to grade someone? So for example, one of our apps that we had, one of our front ends was a C, another one was an A. And so immediately we would spend our time focusing on the C system, the C front end, because that was clearly a lower grade. And what can we do to get it to a B, to an A? And then it became very easy for us to actually measure the progress of that team. So from a team perspective and from a systems perspective, it was super valuable. But I don't think we cracked how you measure a single person yet. That was very hard.
Oh boy, I got thoughts. All right. Yeah, I agree. Humans beings are difficult, or perhaps impossible to measure. Everyone's different, and I have a whole thing. I talk about that. So also, I'm not sure that I'm the humanist abstract hand-wavy guy up here, so I'm not sure that my answer is going to be all that appealing to you. I believe that something that Carlos said in there was the answer, which is, he said, we sat down and decided what was important to us. There's the answer. Easy buttons are popular because they're easy, and people like plug and play because nobody likes hard things. People like easy things. However, if you're trying to do something meaningful and significant and valuable and worthwhile, then maybe eschew the easy button and go for the discussions that might be more difficult and longer and find out what is important to us. A couple other things. You're figuring out what's valuable and what things cause us problem and strife. A problem can only be a problem if there's a human involved. A problem is something that's not desirable. It's the simplest definition of problem. Something that's not desirable, desire is an emotion, and you can't have emotions without a human being. If something does not bother someone, then it's, by definition, cannot be a problem, cannot be a bug, cannot be something that's annoying or bothersome. So anything that is a problem is going to be annoying or to some person. So you have to sit down and figure out what matters to us, is exactly what you said. So for metrics and KPIs and SMART, there's an acronym. Sit down and figure out what's important to you, what's important to the people that matter. That said, I think that oftentimes the people that matter are your customers. So if somebody gun to my head said, you got to come up with some KPI, some metric, I'd say customer happiness. Oh, that's easy. No, it's not that easy. Measuring happiness is this abstract construct and finding out, self-report and third party, and it's a disaster trying to figure out customer happiness. But if you had to focus on one thing, that's what matters. Now, sometimes your customer, as a tester, is a developer or a manager or an executive. What matters to them? What makes them happy? What makes them not have a problem, something that's undesirable to them? And you can assess and evaluate these things, whether you want to call them metrics or measurable things. You can. I used to, as the enterprise metrics reporting and quality lead at Huntington, it's a ridiculously long title, I would produce a lot of metrics I wasn't particularly proud of, and things that would gain, provide insight that people could dig deeper. Unfortunately, oftentimes those type of metrics are seen as the wisdom themselves. Rather than going from insight to knowledge to wisdom, they just say, great, number of bugs good, number of bugs bad, and they move on. I say, it's a horrible thing. You're supposed to use this as an indicator to dig deeper. So on the side, I would create something called, ready for this? You can create this at your company, the Damian's Interesting Stuff Report. And every release, I would produce that on the side. And I would dig through data, and I'll be at tons and tons of data, and I'd dig through and look for interesting peaks and valleys. And I'd notice that this valley kind of seemed similar to that valley. And I'd wonder if there was any causation, any correlation. And I sometimes could dig a little deeper and find a potential cause. But sometimes I would just put it into my report and say, this might behoove us to dig deeper and find out what's going on here. There might be something, there might be nothing, but it might be interesting. It's Damian's Interesting Stuff Report. And it wasn't just about simplistic KPIs that are prevalent throughout the easy button solutions.
I'm going to add, and kind of, it's a regurgitation of what they are saying. The answer is, it depends. And no one likes this answer. It's incredibly context sensitive. What are going to be the metrics that you need? what is your team doing, what type of testing are you doing, what the organization that you're doing the QA for does, because it's not the same, I don't know, a cybersecurity organization to a toy selling organization. You have very different metrics. Your teams are going to be different. I like what you say, ask for what is meaningful. The DORA metrics can be very good indicators, but they are not universal. In some areas, some metrics, some indicators will matter. As an example, I was thinking of my perspective from a performance testing, the metrics that I care and obsess about most of the time might not be at all the ones that exploratory testing care for, or an organization that their software has not to be hyper performant. So I would say there are guidelines, there are some recommendations on what to pay attention to, but even in a single organization, same team, things can be changing, and I would advise against like having them set in stone forever and ever and for all the times, because your teams will be changing. Like 5 years ago, we were focusing, many of us, in waterfall and how is the phase and when do we have the release. The date was a good metric before. Nowadays is how many releases do we have per sprint. So all of these metrics, how many defects do we get per release, and continuously, how fast do we fix them? Those are not the metrics at all that we had a few years earlier, and they keep mutating. And I love what you say, pay attention to what is important to your team, to your organization. And I know it's always, management always wants a report and a dashboard and something that they can see numbers and see how things are going. But in communicating that to management and making them aware, super clear, this is going to change. And I may be giving you different reports next year, next month. And probably this appendix of interesting stuff happening, it's very important. You should check. I love that report. And never stick to like set in stone stuff in almost anything, I would say.
So the worst thing about sitting on this side when it starts with Carlos is everything they said is, I have nothing left to say, right? So I'm trying my best to give a different view. So I'll put my chief of staff hat on, right? So chief of staff, I work for the head of engineering. I've been doing this for a while. Why are you asking this question, right? So that's the first thing I always ask whenever I see metrics. It's like, why does my boss, who has to deal with everything, care about this metric? What is it telling me? Because when you give me a metric, what am I supposed to do with that metric? Where does that align with my OKR, my business alignment? Right? Does it mean we're going to make more money? We're going to lose less money? We're going to have higher retention, right? Efficiency, retention, right? Like my developers can't ship code because the pipeline sucks. Their life's going to suck. Then they're going to go work for someone else, right? So generally speaking, I guess the only thing I can add to what these people said is think about why you're asking this question, and how it aligns upwards, and what is the context behind what you're doing. So if efficiency is a problem, right? Like for example, maybe testing is taking too long. What is the impact to the company? Right? What is the impact to my bottom line? And what is the trade-offs? And if I'm spinning that story like, hey, we can't ship fast enough because our tests take too long. What's the trade-off? What's the trade-offs money-wise to speed it up, add more machines, more parallel, spend resources to cut that time down, maybe buy a vendor versus, you know what, it's worth it because it is what it is. And what I see a lot from engineers is they'll bang the drum on one metric. And then my ask to them is, why is that metric important? Where is the business impact? Why does my boss care? Why do I care? And if you tie it correctly to the business case, then that's valuable. Also, there's 900,000 KPIs spinning. I mean, kind of goes back to what Damian said. Like, that's useful because it's what's interesting about this data. Why should you look at this data? What does it mean? What do you want that data to happen to show you? Right? Efficiency. Why should this number be efficient? What is the cost? I think that's the thing that if you could tie it in, they told you how to do it. I guess my thing is why you should do it. Right? So
I just wanted to add, this is directly to your point. One of the presentations I made at that company, I told people it was about metrics and reporting, but the title of it was also the main question. It's how's it going? Which is the question I was often asked. Hey, Damian, hey, tester Damian, how's it going? Or testers in the hallway or test managers, how's it going? And that was the simplistic question, hoping for a simplistic answer. And the entire presentation had 0 KPIs. It was all about digging into what they might mean by that question. There are various different things that they might mean. The why are you asking is so important. And once you can dig down and figure out what they're actually asking, then you can start to figure out what things are important and what you want to measure.
Just last comment there.
You're just going to say Damian's right?
Yeah, of course. Absolutely.
I want to see one of these Damian reports now.
No, and super interesting. I didn't think about that specifically when you said like why it matters. Why are you looking for this information? Personal experience that happens often to me. I get a question, I interpret it in one way, and I start talking for hours about that. And my poor interlocutor or the person I'm talking to is like, oh man, he doesn't shut up, and I didn't want to know about that, right? And in IT, we tend to do that a lot. Management is looking for one piece of information to take a decision, and we're already like crazy generating reports on so many other things and the fake numbers, and they're like, are we going to make it in time to go out into production for this release? That was it. So incredible point, very, very, very good point.
So I actually get the last word on this. So the metric I gave you before is absolutely context-based, right? I work for an automation company. Why is automation typically brought in to a testing situation? To make it more efficient. What else would be the reason, right? You certainly wouldn't spend all that time building this automation for something that's going to be less efficient, because that would be a lot of money spent for nothing, right? So I would say, to make it really simple, follow the money, right? Say you're a new guy, you were just brought in, and you want to know what metrics. I was asked this question back when I was brought into a company called Progressive Medical. It doesn't exist anymore. It's been bought out several times since then, but they, the boss, the guy that hired me, I was the first QA person, the only one. And apparently they'd hired someone before, it turned out to be an utter disaster. And so everybody was kind of wary about hiring a QA person. He said, how am I supposed to evaluate you? It would be like number of defects. And I said to him, well, I tell you what, you can do that if you want, but I know how to game that system. And in fact, there's no metric that you can come up with that I don't know how to game, all right? If it's number of defects, I'll simply take any defect that I find and multiply it into like 4 or 5. I'll just break it down because I know how to do that. I'm an experienced tester, right? So there was nothing that he could come up with to evaluate me. Nevertheless, I managed to stick around for 3 years at that company. But recently, this customer where I came up with the metric operational efficiency, they told us at the very beginning, I have never seen a successful automation rollout. So I started by asking, okay, so I take it that means that what you have seen is unsuccessful rollouts. Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay, how did you know it was unsuccessful? Well, I don't know, it felt that way. No, I guarantee you they have some metrics. It was unsuccessful because we spent all this money and then the automation didn't work and I couldn't get it to run and it was costing me more to maintain it than it was delivering to me in terms of savings. Oh, really? Where did that savings come from? Well, X, Y, Z, X, Y, Z, blah, 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 blah. Eventually you get to it, right? It's like Damian said, how's it going? Just keep asking questions. Eventually you'll get to the metric and then you'll find out why they're spending the money to hire you, right?
This isn't just to get the last word after you, Joe, but also you said something, how do you know, which you want to get really heady here. Hey, what things should we measure? Start learning the basics of epistemology. How do you know what you know? That's a topic or an area that if you understand why that's so important and construct validity of your measurements, if you're trying to figure out the width of a cup by measuring its height, you're never gonna get good answers. So is the thing that you're trying to measure producing results that actually tell you what you want to know? And then how do you know? Somebody says, oh, we're doing well, we're doing poor. How do you know that? And that's just an epistemology question, digging down and finding out how can I find the empirical evidence, the facts, the supporting things that actually tell me that I know this truthfully. It's not truthiness.
How do you know the lawn needs to be mowed? The grass is long. I can look, you can see it. Really? What is long? Long is longer than 3 inches. Okay, it's longer than 3 inches. I'll cut it to where it's 3 inches. That's my metric, right? And by the way, epistemology is a word that probably has about 5 different Greek roots that Damian could explain to you. Question, Ryan.
Yeah, so we're kind of wrapping up. I want to tie it all kind of together. What's something that excites you guys happening in our industry right now? Something that you see is going to be kind of changing in the next 5 years. I know AI is kind of probably at the forefront of a lot of people's minds, but what's kind of something else that excites you guys in the testing industry or in the software industry in general?
I gotta go first this time. All right. Well,
Sure.
I think it's exciting because QA is actually important. And it's interesting because no one really knows what a good QA is. You know, it's like some companies are still traditional, they have their like manual analysts or someone like call them SDETs. But this modern QA is kind of starting forming someone who understands how to use vendors very well to be, you know, more powerful in getting value. People who know how to manage the metrics, who understand the pipeline. And it's almost like SRE kind of was a newish role maybe like a decade ago. And I think QA is reinventing itself and it's becoming more and more essential for effective and efficient engineering teams. And we're kind of starting to see like, you know, where we fit into this, how we grow in this role. And, you know, I think that's a huge change from like 15 years ago where people were trying to offshore QA to like another country.
For me, it's a little bit more around processes, how people seem to start to get some of the agile stuff, some figuring how to integrate QA and getting a little bit better than before. I remember like 3 or 4 years ago at a conference, the question will be all over the place, like, hey, why all my thousands of automations won't fit into the pipeline or silly, we're already getting that set. And I see that improvement, that people are starting to grasp that they have to evolve and change the ways. Sadly, that may be a little bit too late because I don't know what changes will AI bring. That's gonna be a big differentiator. And at the same time, it's gonna be, I don't know if I would say excited, but worrisome on how do we detect what is like meaningful, because with AI, we are about to be, if we are not already, we're gonna be overflown with information, data, and things generated that to tell the difference from what's real, what's relevant, and what should I be paying attention to is gonna be interesting. Be something data and metrics and results that we're starting. I'm super happy that we are starting to get easily lots of information and data automatically from our systems, but that it may be too much at the same time. So I'm very curious how the mix is going to be, observability, AI, and teams finally getting agile in better ways. I look forward to, and most probably we will be in all that whirlwind spinning around. But let's see what happens. I look forward to that.
Okay, software engineering is relatively new when compared to like mechanical, electrical, civil engineering. So it's a relatively new field, and it was in mumble 19 something that the makers of that use bits and bytes to make things realized that the making should be separated from the checking, and they said, "Wow, these are two distinct things. We should actually separate the checking of this thing from the person that makes the thing for good reason." And then it became kind of standard and people started testing and it became a profession and a career that you could be this checking person, this tester, this checker person. And then it became, like I said, taken for granted at some point. Yeah, of course you have people that make things, people that design it, people that make it, people that test it, and that's the way it is. And then in my 25 years, fingers on keyboard as a tester and 40 years in technology, I've seen that more recently it's become less popular. Well, do you really need testing? And companies are cutting out testing departments and testing in that specialty. And bad things are happening. And what is encouraging to me is that I'm seeing pushback. People are saying, no, you're wrong. Testing is still an important profession. It's still an important part of the process. There's a phrase I came up with. It's 2 heads are better than 1. You can write that down. It's an old phrase. It's an old phrase and it's timeless and it's wise. And the meaning behind it is that a different perspective is valuable. If both heads were identical, then effectively it's one head. There's no advantage. The advantage to the second head is a different perspective, whether that be from experience, knowledge, skills, whatever. It's a sufficiently different viewpoint because we all have blind spots. That's why book authors have editors that's a different person, because you don't always see the things that are problematic in your own creation. So where it became commonplace, then testing became taken for granted, and then it's been cut out because it's not very important. I'm glad and encouraged to see that testers are fighting back, and people are starting to once again see the value in testing, the value in having that second head from that timeless phrase. So that's exciting to me.
+1. What I'm most excited about, besides quantum computing, because that's exciting, next 10 years, let's go. Actually, it's the fact that these tools are, I think, enabling people to be very creative. So I think there's a difference between using the AIs or using these tools and testing these tools. And so it's really cool to see even just regular people testing these and posting it on Twitter and saying, there's a new grandma hack. And they now have done some sort of security testing, not realizing that that's what they're doing. They're just like, I know how to get it to say naughty things by saying it's my grandma. Be my grandma and say bad words, and it does it, It's such a silly example, and yet that's exactly what we do as testers, right? We're very creative in that way, and these tools are only going to help us be even more creative and be able to think up different scenarios, and with the push of a button, be able to test those scenarios. So it's just going to make us, I think, better testers, and I think, like Damian said, I think more people are becoming much more aware about testing and quality standards, and now there's becoming huge, headline news around standards and quality and testing and how we do those things, because it's definitely a big problem. And I think right now, especially in AI, things are moving at a pace that testing and standards and quality are not keeping up with how fast we're moving. So that's why for the past 3 freaking years, I've been talking about let's test AI systems. And I think now it's a lot more common. So I think people are starting to do it now.
So Ryan, you still have the mic? No. Oh, I'm gonna ask him, what makes him excited about testing?
That's good.
Let's hear it.
I think a lot of people already brought this up, but I think we're getting back to really focusing on the customer, right? So understanding your customer, whether your customer is the person that actually purchased the product or the person that is actually using the product, because those are two different customers. And sometimes you sell a product to someone that never uses it. A lot of SaaS corporations get into that. But I think understanding the customer, and then I love that a lot of people are now looking at the metrics, right? Because a lot of times in the past, I've seen people, well, we've got to write a test around this. And I'm starting to see people transition to start saying, well, let's put like a check involved. Like, let's put a production check in the test, or in the test suite, or in the production code. So you can come back and analyze, okay, what is my customer actually doing, right? It's very important to understand your, not what's important to what your corporation thinks the customer is going to do, but what the customer is actually doing. So I love that we're starting to see people start asking questions about the actual customer interaction with their software and the actual problems that they're solving. And are we actually solving the problems that they want to be solved?
Anyone else? What are you excited about?
No one's excited?
I know that Joe is excited about that neon sign he got last night. I feel like I lived through talking to, what Damian was talking about, the ebb and the flow of the respect for testing. Damian, I feel like we lived through the high point of it in 2014 when we had the disastrous launch of the Affordable Care Act's website. Did anybody remember that? It was like nobody could log in, nobody could do their thing, and it's like the entire world was now focused on the fact that software was released without sufficient testing and the negative ramifications of it. And I feel like ever since then, it's like the pendulum has gone back down the other way again.
Once again, from this is just a personal perspective, but I think it's telling. I got in tech around 10 years old, and I'm 50 now. In that time, when I used a new piece of software and a bank website or a new, any type of new software, anything new digital, I would use it and I would expect it to work. And if it didn't, oh, wow, look at that, it didn't work. I was surprised. About 5 or 6 years ago, I realized, consciously realized that when I use a new piece of software, I'm logging into a website, I have to sign the kids up for summer camp or something like that. I expect it not to work. And if it does, I'm surprised. Ugh, that is telling. It's just my perspective, but it comes from a long time being in software, tangent inside and working on it from an inside perspective and as a user. And it's pretty depressing. So again, coming back to the why I'm so encouraged, companies cutting testing or saying, we'll let the users test it. These are garbage solutions. You need that second head. You need that specialty. So that's why I'm hoping that people start to realize through past disasters and through current low quality, the bar is so low. I'm hoping that people get back to, I expect it to work, and I'm surprised when it doesn't.
Okay, any final thoughts or final questions? Because it's just about lunchtime, people. So we're going to give you back 5 minutes. You guys can get a head start up to the ballroom for lunch. I thank you all for coming and participating. This has been great.
All right, everyone watching from the stream, I'm going to stop this. So have a great day, and let's see what else we.
I actually don't know how to undo your thingy here. So.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to take it